Welcome to the London Borough of Barnet's Holocaust Commemoration Day video. This ceremony is normally held annually at Middlesex University, where on the 27th of January, the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp, we remember all those who were murdered in the Holocaust under Nazi persecution. But like so many events over the last year, COVID-19 has meant that we're asking you to join us virtually. The Second World War saw the greatest genocide of people ever known. Millions of innocent people lost their lives simply for being who they were. Be the light in the darkness is the theme that has been chosen for this year's Holocaust Memorial Day, and we're going to hear from different members of our community about what this means to them. Can I take this opportunity to thank everyone for taking part and to you for watching the video. It's so important that we do remember what has happened and what has tragically been repeated in genocides in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia and Darfur, and is still occurring at this very moment in different parts of the world. We must stand together and never forget. We all have a collective responsibility to confront prejudice, racism, hatred and anti-Semitism. We're very honoured that the Chief Rabbi will begin our event.
The Worshipful Mayor of Barnet, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. Sadly, there has been so much darkness, and there continues to be so much darkness within our fragile world. If I consider my life and the people who have inspired me most, there is no doubt that they are individuals who have experienced adversity and who have emerged determined to inspire others. People who don't crave pity, but who make this into a better world, not despite their experiences, but because of them. The book of Genesis, in describing the aftermath of the flood, tells us how God placed a rainbow in the sky as a sign that on no future occasion would life in this world be destroyed. And the way that that original rainbow is described is as being a rainbow that emerges from the clouds. Light comes from the sun. It is transmitted through the darkness of clouds and it emerges in spectacular form as a rainbow. This is what our Holocaust survivors have been for us. They have passed on their journey of life through the darkest clouds that possibly could exist. And they've emerged to give a contribution of inestimable value to our society. And now that, sadly, we recognize that our survivors will not live forever, each and every one of us has a responsibility. Elie Wiesel said, "If you listen to a witness, you become a witness." So now we have the responsibility to be the witnesses of the future. The theme for this year's Holocaust Memorial Day is "Be the light in the darkness." That's exactly what each and every one of us now must be, like our survivors, to be a light, to be an inspiration, to guarantee that through our deeds and through our words, we will contribute towards decency, towards friendship, towards the warmth of unity, of truth, towards peace on earth, in order to guarantee that what transpired during the Holocaust of the Jewish people will never happen again.
Rabbi, can I ask you, why is it that in so many religions the lighting the candle is so significant?
So the lighting of a candle that we are about to perform here is something in Jewish thought that is very significant. The flame is seen to represent the soul of a person, the untouchable, the intangible essence of the person, and the light is seen to symbolize the goodness, the good deeds that we perform throughout our lives, bringing so much light to so much darkness. And therefore, when we light that flame, we recall, firstly, the tremendous loss that we have all suffered, the lights that were extinguished, but we also make a commitment to ourselves that we are going to redouble our efforts to light a flame that will grow brighter and brighter each day throughout the times of darkness.
Can I ask, could you light a candle in memory, please, of someone who is important to you?
So I am lighting this candle in memory of my great-grandmother who perished in the Holocaust.
In November 2019, Mala Tribich, a Holocaust survivor, planted 1,000 snowdrops outside Middlesex University. This was part of the Borough of Barnet's project started in 2007 to remember the 1.5 million children who died in the Holocaust. As mayor last year, I helped St Andrew's Primary School plant another 1,000 bulbs, each bulb representing a lost life. A total of 57,000 bulbs have now been planted. Anthony Lishak, a local Holocaust educator, has videoed Mala for us in a specially adapted vehicle before the COVID lockdown. We will hear parts of her moving story threaded throughout this video. Other interviews have all been recorded virtually prior to the latest restrictions. This, of course, has its limitations, but maybe during this COVID pandemic, it adds to the strength of the experience shared. Each contributor will then light a candle at the end of their contribution. Mala was a child of the Holocaust. We're very grateful to her for sharing her experiences. Here she explains why the planting of the bulbs matters to her.
It is very significant and also very painful to think of 1.5 million children that were lost in the Holocaust. I mean, I was really lucky to survive with some others. And it is very important for me to know that this memory of these children will go on, that they won't be forgotten. That's really the main object. I light this candle to commemorate the 1.5 million children that perished in the Holocaust.
They stood in fear, where could they go? They stood so brave, what did they know? On this day heroes pray, each prayer meant for you. We
I would like to thank the London Borough of Barnet for allowing me to speak at this year's Holocaust Memorial Day, which is very, very important to me. It's up to each and every one of us to shine a light through the darkness of hatred, racism, prejudice, and bigotry. To get past the labels that we put on people, the hijab, the skull cap, the colour of the skin or the sexuality, and see the human being behind those labels. Human being that are all the same, and we all belong to the same race, the human race. Only by doing this can we defeat bigotry, hatred, sexism, ignorance, and prejudice, because we know where these things lead, and we have got to make a better society. We have got to stop these things happening again. I light this candle in memory of the grandparents I never knew who perished in Auschwitz.
Back in 1994, I visited Auschwitz concentration camp. I was really struck as I walked around the place by the lack of birdsong and by the stunted tree growth. I was really shocked when we saw the large glass canisters that were full of glasses and full of shoes and full of suitcases, everyday items, which really brought home to me the extraordinary atrocities that took place in Auschwitz. I was particularly struck also at the death block and the sign that was up at the death block in different languages, basically saying, "May this never happen again," or words to that effect. And yet in 1994, as I visited, the Rwandan genocide was taking place. Will we ever learn? Why does history keep on repeating itself? I'm very aware that as we gather in this place and online, that in Cabo Delgado in northern Mozambique, there has been the extraordinary uprising, insurgency that's been taking place there, which has brought about the displacement of over 500,000 people, twice the size of the numbers of residents of Barnet. Thousands of people have been killed. 750,000 people have been affected by this displacement. Why am I raising this? Well, I'm the bishop for Alma. Alma itself means soul in Portuguese, and Alma stands for Angola, London, Mozambique Association. And so today, as we gather, as we think of Holocaust Memorial Day, as we think in parts of the world, hatred towards brothers and sisters continues to affect both political life, economic life, and like those shoes, like those glasses, and like those suitcases, for many people, those deeply affected, largely the poorest in the world, their everyday life. I light this candle today for the people of Cabo Delgado in northern Mozambique.
We're a very diverse group, and by that I mean very different. But although we're from many different backgrounds and hold different beliefs, we all share something similar. We all share in the light of a divine presence, a light that cannot be extinguished by darkness. In fact, the darker it becomes, the brighter our light shines. We need light to see one another for what we really are, to see that we are truly brothers and sisters. And so I light a candle in memory of all victims of the Holocaust, of genocides, and for those who have died because of their faith and belief. Peace be with you all.
2020 has been a difficult year for all of us. It's important to remember that we can pull together as a community, then we can get through challenging times. Let us unite and resist the hatred and prejudice in the society. We must demonstrate inclusion, hope, and continue to learn about one another and ensure such events never happen again. This Holocaust Memorial Day, let us remember the innocent lives lost in the terrible atrocities of the world. Let us be the light in the darkness. Let us eradicate the darkness of ignorance, the darkness of misconception, doubt, and fear. I would like to light a candle in the memory of all the lives lost during the pandemic this year.
At UJS, we are doing our part to be a light in the darkness. Educating about the Shoah, the Holocaust, is a cornerstone of the work that UJS does. Through this, we work hard, educating and combating anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial on campuses all over the country. We have a responsibility to tackle discrimination and ensure our students are safe from hate. It is our Jewish students who are at the forefront of spreading this message across universities. Today, Jewish students are the light in the darkness, working together to build a better future for all. I light this candle in memory of Robert Torsig, only 22 years old, and died in Auschwitz in 1942.
within 2 months of the beginning of the war, by the 1st of November, we had already been forced out of our homes and into the ghetto. And when it came to deportation or rounding people up, it all depended on the day, on the time, what they wanted, who they wanted. But children and old people had a very hard time to survive. Not many did. All these people were kept in jail, and then after a little while they were taken to the Jewish cemetery, lined up against the wall and shot.
My name is Talia.
And my name is Zainab.
And we both had the honour of being part of the Maccabi GB delegation on March the Living UK in 2018 and 2019.
I took part in the trip in 2018, before March of the Living had introduced their interfaith bus. I was part of the Young Professionals group, which was put together by Maccabi GB. I was one of a few non-Jewish Muslim participants that year, and I can confidently say that this invaluable experience has taught me at first hand what books will never be able to fully represent. By learning about Jewish life in Poland, you begin to realise that the community faced anti-Semitism since the beginning, and this escalated gradually over the years, eventually resulting in mass-scale crimes against the community. This shows how important it is to tackle all types of discrimination and racism, no matter how small or low level these acts may seem. If we allow discrimination to grow and thrive in our communities, even as bystanders, we contribute to the rise of injustice. We should never respond to oppression with silence.
For me, it was my second trip to Poland, but that did not lessen the shock, sadness and emotion I felt visiting sites of such atrocities. Having the opportunity to learn from not only fantastic educators, but also survivors themselves was a humbling experience. I'm acutely aware that as the years go on, the number of survivors left with us dwindles, making it more important for continual remembrance and education.
The theme of this year's Holocaust Memorial Day is Be the Light in the Darkness. When I think about this theme, I am reminded of all the people who bravely risked their lives to hide and help protect families during the Holocaust. Upstanders, that Talia and I like to call them, people who stood up for what they believed and helped others despite being from different religions at huge personal cost.
Through our work at Stand Up Education Against Discrimination, Zainab and I encourage and empower young people to be upstanders in their communities today. Our respective trips to Poland with March the Living reaffirmed the importance of anti-discrimination education and continually inspires our work on a daily basis.
Thank you, Zainab and Talia. We're now going to hear from Vice-Chancellor of Middlesex University, who was asked about the significance of the Holocaust Memorial Day and this year's theme. Nazreem Kakir, a Syrian refugee and Barnet resident, then follows with a moving description of her experiences. She has now graduated from Middlesex University.
It's a way of making sure it is part of our consciousness as a whole community, and as a way of us humanizing each other and not ever getting into a situation where we can start to dehumanize the differences between ourselves. So for me, to be honest, it's really about that community and connectivity piece that is the most important thing. The idea that we are both in light and in dark, but the light is what gives us the real hope for the future. And in education, we're perpetually actually in the gloom in one way or another, because we're kind of slightly outside the things that we know. So every time we're doing research, we're of course researching the as yet unknown. And that's partly about people having enough confidence to keep going, even when things seem uncertain. So that part of it, both the light that draws us and the light that supports us, seems to me to be just a wonderful way of thinking, and really is a metaphor for what we should be as a university. It is symbolizing Elise Reicher, and Elise was an Austrian academic. She was the first woman professor in Austria and contributed so much to university life. So her sacrifice was enormous, but we light this candle in memory of Elise Riker.
At the end of February 2012, me and my family, we were forced to leave our city homes after bombing our area, Bab Amr, by the Assad regime. The war kept following us, so we had to move to Lebanon. And this is like the first time I was feeling like I'm really a refugee. And in 2016, we had a chance to flee to Europe, and we came to London. What I think we share as a Syrian refugee and Jewish refugee in the past, we share the concept of the refugee. So, like being displaced from your home, being also homesick, being like feeling a stranger, feeling like you are in a place like you would never imagine yourself to be in. We didn't want to leave our countries, and we were forced, and we both refugees, so I can imagine in the past what their feelings was. During my darkest time with my family, you would never imagine that you would find the hope, you would find the light, because you are in a dark place. You don't imagine yourself you coming out to the light. When I came here, when I saw the welcome from people, when I saw the people how they were willing to help us, and they asked about our needs, the psychological needs. They understood us, they understood what the trauma that we've been through, and they helped. Their smiles, their welcoming, they welcomed us in their homes, and that was like the light in the dark for me. It was a Jewish community who wanted to help those people. I really love this place now. I feel safe, I feel happy, and I feel like I'm doing things. I'm improving my life. I'm going ahead. Every day there is a plan, there is things you do. So I appreciate every single help that we've got. That was the light in our dark. This candle, I'm lighting it for all Syrians prisoners who still not free. I can't imagine their suffer, how their 10 years in prison would be. I'm lighting it to my brothers and sister who I lost in 2012. I'm lighting it for the future, for my children, who I feel like they were the most reason for me to carry on. And I wish for them to have a better future than us.
Then they shaved our heads. We went through cold communal showers. And when we got out at the other way, we walked through and got out the other end. And then they gave us a concentration camp garb, this striped jacket and a skirt and clogs. And when we looked, well, we were fully clothed and ready to march on. And when we looked at one another, we really could not recognize each other. I can't tell you what a difference it makes to a woman when her hair suddenly goes. And, we felt it so deeply. It really does something to you. You're stripped of your identity. Then you're just nothing. Nobody. We're exactly all the same. And one of the things it does is to take away your hope. And without hope, there's no way of surviving. It's something that's very difficult to explain. What feeling? Once you feel everything is hopeless, this is the end, you just give up.
This lesson was taught by the late Rabbi Hugo Grimm, one of the wonderful rabbis of the British Reform movement, who himself was a Holocaust survivor. He writes, "I did not learn this lesson about faith in a theological college. That came much later. But in a miserable little concentration camp in German Silesia, grotesquely called Liebe Rose, Lovely Rose. It was the cold winter of 1944, and although we had nothing like calendars, my father, who was a fellow prisoner there, took me and some of our friends to the corner in our barrack. He announced that it was the eve of Hanukkah, produced a curious-shaped clay bowl, and began to light a wick immersed in his precious, but now melted, margarine ration. Before he could recite the blessing, I protested at the waste of food. He looked at me, and then at the lamp, and finally said, 'You and I have seen that it's possible to live up to 3 weeks without food. We once lived almost 3 days without water, but you cannot live properly for even 3 minutes without hope.'"
And what we saw defies description. How can one describe all these? The first thing that hit you as you walked in was the smell and the smog. And there were people there, and they were walking, but they were shuffling along. They looked like zombies, and there were skeletons, and they'd shuffle along and just collapse and die. You could be speaking to someone, and they would die in front of you. I remember looking out the window. I was lying there and I saw people running. I didn't know why they were running or where they were running, but all I could think of was how have they got the strength to run, because typhus is so debilitating. You can't move a muscle. So that was the 15th of April 1945, when we were liberated by the British, the amazing British. It wasn't an instant relief. It took time to realize what's happening. And in a way, it's a shame that I have that to say, because people would expect me to say, why, the war is over, it's wonderful, we're alive. It wasn't like that. You see, in England, the war was over, people were dancing in the street. But it wasn't like that in Belgium. However, those that recovered made a very quick recovery. It was quite amazing what happened afterwards.
Be a light sender by Karen Salmonson. Be someone who lets your inner light shine through, so you might shine and rise to your highest self. Be someone whose light inspires others to shine more brightly, igniting their inner embers and brightening their inner darkness. Be someone who is a beacon for love, faith, and forgiveness, whose light sheds illumination on the steps to take which lead to the highest good. Ask yourself each day what you can do to let your light shine more brightly. Be a light sender.
And the reason I talk, and I consider it very important, is because I don't want it to be forgotten. I don't want the victims to be forgotten. And I'm not counting myself among them, because I survived. I mean the people who didn't survive. And there were families wiped out so completely. Sometimes a whole town. So the whole family is gone, their neighbors, their friends. There's nobody to remember them. And I feel duty-bound to keep that memory going, because if nobody remembers them, it'll be as if they never existed. But there's another reason as well, and that is that there's a lot to be learned from the Holocaust. And it's just self-evident that what can happen when a society breaks down, a despot rules, there is discrimination and racism and anti-Semitism, all the isms, and we've seen what it leads to. So we must really guard against it. And I think that these days the young people are actually keen to listen to someone who was actually there. It's become quite valuable for the young generation to listen to survivors, and that is why I speak about it.
Earlier you saw some of the photos I took when visiting Auschwitz-Birkenau. In the final photo I was standing looking ahead to the entrance of the extermination camp. I looked down at the disused railway track and reflected that this exact position had witnessed trains filled with people travelling towards the gas chambers and their death. But through the gates in the opposite direction, the tracks reached out to the rest of Europe and places where bystanders could have done something to save them. Although there were many brave individuals who did risk their lives to help, why did the surrounding villagers, the railway workers, and so many others remain bystanders? Please let's learn from history and be the light in the darkness if you witness prejudice, racism, hatred, or anti-Semitism. I light this candle in memory of my great-grandmother Johanna, who never believed that her German friends would let her be taken off to be murdered. I recently watched 2 BBC programmes featuring Robert Rinder, My Family, the Holocaust and Me. The last few minutes of the second programme for me were extremely powerful as Robert talks to the last survivor of the Treblinka death camp, who unbelievably feels there is always hope, something that features throughout this video. Robert agreed to end our journey together.
In times of the most hopeless, suffocating darkness, at moments of our greatest challenge, the extraordinary thing is that the flickering light of hope has always lived on. The darkest of those times are within the living memory of those who survived the Holocaust and the millions of souls extinguished. This year, over 7 million people across our country, from every background and every community, many of whom had never met a Jewish person, many of whom who knew nothing at all about the Shoah, chose to tune in to watch a documentary about that darkness. They chose to listen, to hear, and in many cases, to share their stories of incalculable loss and of trauma. They chose themselves to become witnesses. They chose to be a light. We celebrate that light tonight on Holocaust Memorial Day. Our candles illuminate a sacred reason, not just to remember the past, but for optimism for the future and for the good of humanity. For me, the candle that I will light is in memory of my grandfather, who emerged through that darkness with an enduring sense of purpose and a thirst for life. And also for Leon Ritz, the last living eyewitness to the horrors of Treblinka. Some of you may have seen him, but let me share a story. As I stood alongside him, next to him on that earth where my family are buried in unmarked ground, and as my mother reached for the words of the Kaddish for our family, Leon exclaimed, he touched me on the shoulder and said so that the world could hear that our prayer wasn't for me or just for our family, but he said, for all of the living people of the world. Whatever darkness there is, and in whatever form it comes, we know that our light, the light of humanity, can never be dimmed, and that we will always, despite everything, despite anything, have an infinite gift for hope. That we, all of us, have a limitless spirit, not just for survival, but that within us we have the courage to fight the darkness of hate, and that we can all go on and on in joy, in compassion, and in love. This is for my grandfather and for Leon Ritz.
I light this candle in memory of my parents, Jacob and Bella Koshland. Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his countenance towards you and grant you peace and health and joy. Amen.